Hi, it's Lady Lex UK, and this is a Dreams Tools tutorial. We're working our way through Sculpt modes tools, and we've got to stamp and smear. These are the main tools for sculpting. These are the ones that you're going to use most, and getting to grips with these are probably the most important thing for sculpting in Dreams. So we'll start off with the stamp tool. The default shape is the cube. If you click on the cube up here for shapes, you've got all of these options for a shape that you want to stamp down. So you can stamp it like this. I can make all these shapes. I can put them on top of each other. I can put them separate. And this is now one shape, so I can now move it around in assembly mode. So that is the stamp tool, and these shapes are all individual and not smeared. Now the difference between stamp and smear, if I go into smear, now you can go into smear with by going to tools and then clicking on smear, or you can hold down L1 and press triangle. I'll do that again. Hold one. You can see that changing on the UI on my imp from stamp to smear. It's the only indication. Also at the top there you can see it's flashing from stamp to smear on those yellow icons. The difference with smear is, and by the way, don't confuse the two, because smear will literally smear the shape. So if you think you're in stamp and you're in smear, you might end up with something like that, which is not what you want. But the idea with smear is that you can hold down X and smear away. But let's go back to stamp. So the options on stamp is to press the X button to stamp it down, or R2 to stamp it down. Both work. Personally, I use X, the cross, on the DS4. I don't use the R2 button, but let me know in the comments, which do you use, the X or the R2? As well as plonking a shape down, you can also cut with the shape. So if you press triangle, you can use that as a cutout shape instead. Make sure you have scoped into the object you want to cut, and this is all one object, even though it looks like lots of individual squares. It is actually one big sculpt. So there you can cut into it like this, and then you can change the shape. And I can make shapes bigger. Now the thing about the stamp tool that is different from the smear tool is it has a blend mode. Now it doesn't tell you on the UI here anything other than rotate. Let me just go back to the cube. Is rotate, so that's L2, and you can move with the right stick and the left stick for full 360 degree turns on that object. You can resize with the D-pad, up and down. You've got the add and subtract, and then the exit tool. What it doesn't tell you is the other menu that you have for the stamp tool, which is L1 and square. And this is the stamp shape tool, and this is quite an important tool for accessing some of the extras. So first of all, we have controlled scale. Now I don't know what this does, because you can't actually toggle that tick off, so I'm going to leave that because it seems to be fixed on that, so I'm not 100% sure. You can, while you're in this mode, stretch the object, pull the item. Now this is not for things that have stamped down, this is just for the stamp shape that you've got on your imp. So once you've got L1 and X, and you can change the dimensions. Once you've done that, of course, if you want to go back to your original cube, you'll have to exit the tool and then go back in. Sometimes you can go right and then left again in order to get back to its default shape. Let's go back L1 and square. So yeah, you can stretch and manipulate the actual stamping tool by stretching it. Some of these shapes have got some interesting options on that. The sphere, for example, makes a very nice flattened shape like this. That can be very useful for all sorts of things. I find that the cylinder is also very, very good for making flattened circles. You might be using these for things like wheels, and rather than using the sphere, use these for wheels and things. That's the shape. So manipulating the actual shape that you're stamping is by stretching it with that extra tool is quite important. So that's that. And then we have blend amount. At the moment I've got no blend, so if I was to stamp it down, it's just a full solid shape. And if I put blend on, you can see now it is manipulating all the shapes around it, sort of pulls them together. You can see that this shape here sort of pulls it towards each other, sort of blends it, stretches it a bit. And this is very good for making organic shapes. And you also have the option for hard blend. This keeps more of the angles, so it's blending, but it's with harder angles. It's not as rounded. It's very good for making rock formations and things like that. So it's more angular with the shapes. And of course you can also cut. Now I find blend cut to be extremely useful. Let's go back to a soft blend. As you can see, I can manipulate the edges of this shape and round them off. Very good for organic shapes to get rounded corners. And you can cut into it and make texture like this, very subtly like that. Yeah, that's textured. That looks really cool. So it's best to experiment around with these blend tools. I love using the blend tool. I find that this is my preferred way of sculpting, because it feels more like I'm playing about with clay rather than trying to manipulate shapes. So yeah, really very useful, very, very powerful. You also have looseness amount, so you can change the looseness of your shape. So you can blend so that your object can have looseness, different looseness at one end than it does on the other end. So it can be sharp at one end and loose at the other if you want. Just blend the two things together. Then you have something called varying looseness, which I'm not 100% sure about, to be honest. That's with varying looseness on. And this is the same shape with it off. I'm not 100% sure why you'd use it, to be honest. I don't get it. I don't really know what that's for. So I don't use it. I don't ever use it. Then you've got something called hole. Not all objects have a hole in them. So the cube, let's just come out. Let's start again. The cube has hole. So there we go. So you want to make frames and things like that. This is perfect for that. And don't forget, you can also cut holes. So this is very good for putting in brick shapes into a wall. Like that. So you can cut your own bricks into a wall. Very useful. The cylinder that has a hole, again, this is very useful, making rims, wheels, obviously pipes, tubes. Very good for that. The Sphere also has a hole, but you won't see it unless you use section. And again, not all objects have section either. So sphere has section. So it cuts itself into quarters, halves. So halves and quarters, that's what it does. Let's go back in. Let's change the shape. Like I say, not all shapes have got these options. As you can see, there's no hole and there's no section for the cone, which is really awkward. It would be lovely if we could have sections for the cone. That'd be very, very useful, but it doesn't have it. You do have stretch, and you can create some really nice cone shapes. Flattened cones are very, very useful. Let's go back. The donut, that doesn't have a hole because it already has a hole. But you can make better rings just by pushing it down like this and make it bigger and smaller. It maintains that ring, which can be useful. Unfortunately, the only way to get a flattened ring is to use the cylinder. Because, I mean, we can move these around a bit. We can make that into like a fat sphere, I suppose is the way to describe it. Pretty good for lots of things, but there's not an awful lot of difference with this, because it flattens down with a flat top, so you get that disc. But again, no hole, unfortunately, and no section. I really do wish all of these shapes had all the same. Wedge. This can give you a hole like that, so you can create triangular pieces. Very good for industrial sets, etc. But no section. Then we've got hexagon, hole but no section. Good for beehive type things. Also shapes. Hexagons are very good because they tile very well. Pyramid, no hole, no section. It is what it is. Though you can manipulate the corners and make more of a polygon, parallelogram type shape, like this. Diamonds, that sort of thing. So you can manipulate the pyramid. Worth experimenting with. Rounded cube. Sadly, this does not have a hole. I really would love the rounded cube to have a hole option and a section, just like the other cube. It would be incredibly useful. As it is, it's very difficult to actually put a hole in one of those. And then the curve again. This is a specialist object, a specialist shape. You can stretch this. It's got anchor points so that you can pull out the curve, and you can resize the ends so they can have fatness and a thinness at different ends. Very good for things like talons, horns, all shapes that you need to manipulate around something that's round. This is really very good because you can pull it round a shape and get it so that it's rounded. And a lot of people prefer to use this if you're going to be smearing a sphere shape. Instead of using the sphere, use this curve instead of the sphere. Apparently you get a much smoother line. Be interested to see, experiment with that, but that's what I've been told. Okay, so let's go back to our cube. So here's our cube. So we've seen the hole, we've seen the section, we've seen everything that is on here, how you can manipulate it. And that stamp tool is incredibly strong and useful. Now, the opposite of this, obviously, is smear. So we press L1 and triangle to get into smear mode. And now I've got an option to smear. Now, personally, I find smear a little annoying because you get this effect. Now, I don't like this effect with all the little lines. Now, you can... The slower you go, the less lines you get. The faster you go, the more pronounced it is. So speed is makes a huge difference. Also density. You know, the slower you go, the more dense the shape will be in terms of fleck, and then more thermo it will be. But I'm not sure that I like... If I wanted to make an elongated thing like this that's smeared, I think I would like put down my cube, clone it a few times, and then make my shape, and then keep cloning it until I get the smooth shape I want. You need to clone it quite a lot until it gets that you can't see the lines. There we go. So that is a cloned version of... Whoops. Smear. That. It's a different effect, it's a different technique, and it really does, it depends how smooth you want everything. You can manipulate these shapes afterwards, but there's different ways of doing the same thing. Of course, I've got thousands and thousands and thousands of these now, which is a bit of a pain. To make sure you group it so you can delete it, because I've got like thousands of them now. But smear is pretty much the same tool with all the same things. So you've got rotate with L2, and the same. We've got resize, the same. We've got add and subtract, the same. But this time you can smear it. So smear is a very good way of deleting objects quickly, deleting bits and pieces like this, because the stamp tool takes a while, because you can only stamp one at a time. So for deleting, for taking things away, smear is very good. I use smear an awful lot less than I do stamp. Stamp is what I use most, but it's all to do with style of what you like to make. Lots of people prefer smear for some reason. So it's worth just experimenting with the tools. So that's about it. Like I say, you can see here we've got in smear, it's exactly the same as before, except we're missing the blend tool. That's the only difference, but it's quite fascinating to try different shapes and smear them and check things out. One thing I need to say about smear that you do need to be aware of: if you've got grid on and you try to smear, you get this. Now, this is a great effect if that is what you're going for. So if I was making something that I wanted this effect, then it's excellent. But if I wanted it to smear, it's great for getting regular shaped pieces like this together, but it's not smearing. It's turned the smear tool into a stamp tool, but stamp within the grid. So it's really useful but can be a bit of a pain if you forget. So if you're after this sort of an effect, then you must turn the grid off, otherwise it will not do it. So there we go. These are the main tools. I recommend just experimenting with them, trying them all out. Just sitting there, sculpt away, just try removing things, take things away, using the blend tool, using the holes, trying all of the shapes, and just play about with it, and you will very quickly learn how to sculpt with it. It's pretty intuitive once you've got the hang of it. The difficult thing is controlling the mouse, the imp, with your DS4 controller, because that's the hard skill. Once you've got that, this is all pretty straightforward and simple. The hard bit is controlling the imp, but just persevere with it. If you're having difficulty, you will get it, and you will get fine control. You'll be quite surprised. Right, there we go. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in dreams.